We had some significant updates with regards to our relationship with China. Number of different pieces here. So the very latest, let's put this up on the screen. You had a Chinese J-16 jet fighter, which flew directly in front of an American surveillance plane that was flying in international airspace over the South China Sea last Friday. That forced the U.S. Air Force plane to fly through the fighter's wake turbulence and caused the U.S. aircraft to shake. The Pentagon felt so strongly about the aggressive nature of this incident that they actually released the video, which we have. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'll just do my best to narrate. You see the jet. You see it very close to the American jet. It comes through. You can see, since the camera's in the cockpit of the American jet, you can see the way that it is shaking as it goes through the fighter's wake turbulence. So that is the incident that is at question. This comes at a particularly fraught time in U.S.-Chinese relations. Things have been going sideways ever since that whole spy balloon situation. So here is the latest on that. Go ahead and put this up on the screen from the Wall Street Journal. They report that China rebuffed the Pentagon chief, blunting push for rapprochement. U.S. had proposed a meeting. China accused the U.S. of insincerity. Here are the details here. They say they rebuffed that U.S. request for a meeting between their two defense chiefs on the sidelines of an annual security forum in Singapore this coming weekend, showing the limits of that tentative rapprochement. The decision by China formally to inform the Pentagon shuts the door for now on a meeting between those two defense secretaries, which the U.S. had proposed. They also said China's dismissal of the proposal was termed in an unusually blunt way. These diplomats have, this is the way we communicate these things, and this is the fashion we communicate. And they felt that this broke typical decorum, apparently, and was unusually blunt. And this was an interesting comment here from a think tank official about their assumption of how the Chinese were viewing things. They said the Chinese believe they have the most leverage when dealing with officials who handle economic issues. So they are prioritizing those engagements over ones involving national security. I also pulled for us the South China Morning Post to give the sort of Chinese version of these events and why they rebuffed this meeting. They said, put this up on the screen, China says the U.S. must correct its mistaken actions before top defense chiefs can meet. This is per their foreign ministry spokeswoman. They say Washington should earnestly respect the sovereignty, security, and interests of China and immediately correct its mistaken actions to show its sincerity to talk. And they pointed, Emily, in particular, to the fact that their defense chief is actually under U.S. sanctions, which the U.S. doesn't have any intention of lifting. But I also think that's kind of an excuse for them to, have some justification for why they didn't want this meeting to go forward.
Yeah, and I think it's the Journal that notes that they still haven't rescheduled that Beijing trip that Blinken was supposed to take.
That's right.
During that initial spy balloon upheaval. That was supposed to coincide with a trip by our Secretary of State to Beijing.
Right.
And they said, we're going to table this and reschedule it. That was our move. The United States made that decision because the Biden administration was taking so much flack for not shooting down the spy balloon. And they still haven't rescheduled it, and it's months later. And it's interesting also, the spy balloon started drifting over the United States in another situation where there was a planned meeting. That's also obviously echoed by what just happened this week. And yeah. I think worth noting, too.
Yeah, I think it's a real shame that that meeting didn't go through. I think it's a real shame that they pulled the plug on this meeting as well. And within the Biden administration, the reporting is that you do have sort of dueling views of how to approach the relationship with China. Obviously, some of Biden's signature initiatives have been designed to try to claw back some productive capacity here, especially with regard to semiconductor chips. And so they've taken that approach from an economic perspective. And you have certain folks within the administration, those who are more focused on the economy or who are more focused on climate, who say, listen, if we're going to tackle these challenges, especially around the climate crisis, we're going to have to work with China. And so we need to have these open lines of communication. You also have, Pentagon and military brass who just feel like, all right, in order to avoid any real, dire mishaps or misunderstandings, we need to make sure that we're in communication. But you also have thinking thinking within the Biden White House that, wants to take a more sort of hawkish and aggressive and adversarial relationship with China. And so you see them kind of oscillating between these two approaches, I think, back and forth. And, China now at this point, I guess, over the spy balloon situation and just wanting to assert themselves here, sort of thumbing their noses at the U.S.
That's so interesting about the internal dynamics of the Biden administration because, you see it in just a very, I think, confused policy towards China. And to your point, if that's reflective of internal debate about what the right course of action is, I mean, maybe this puts the Biden administration, maybe this forces their hand, maybe it puts them in a position where the people internally who are fighting to take a more hawkish stance on China inevitably are winning out, because if you hit that brick wall,
their hand.
Yeah, when you hit that brick wall and diplomatic relations are strained to the point where you can't have these meetings anymore, then that's when you start to get to I would say a dangerous place. And I think there's obviously good reasons to have the hawkish instincts towards China, especially when you look at, exactly what the video clip that you just showed. Yeah, it's understandable, but at the same time, that puts us closer and closer to a hot war.
Yeah, which would be a disaster for us, for them, for a lot of people around the world. And China has long taken this approach. That's why I found that comment so interesting about how they're most interested in dealing with officials who handle economic issues. I mean, they really sort of understand our society and how much it is driven by like capitalism and by capital. And so this was noteworthy. Elon Musk is actually just visited China. Go ahead and put this up on the screen. And we have some notes here from the Financial Times about that meeting. China calls for stable ties with the U.S. and meeting with Elon Musk. Billionaire's audience with the foreign minister highlights complex relationship with Beijing. So the fact that this meeting is coming at this time, I think, is also noteworthy and fits with this idea of, they feel like the way they can pull our strings is through economics. And it's not just us, too. I mean, this is why they're, with their initiatives in Africa, lending a lot of money to build out ports and roads and bridges and fund their infrastructure. Also, by the way, loading them up with debt as their own sort of version of imperialism. So they're very skilled and adept at using their own economic power and might as a sort of power play, both with us and with some of our leading entrepreneurs, but also with countries around the world. Here are some of the details from that meeting, in addition to calling for that stable and constructive ties. In a statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry quoted Musk as comparing U.S.-China interests to conjoined twins, saying Tesla opposed decoupling of the world's two biggest economies. They face some internal concern about Musk's relationship and Tesla's penetration within their market, because they saw in particular the way that SpaceX satellites using Starlink were utilized in the Ukraine war. And so in the same way, like we're having this whole conversation here about TikTok and what Chinese are doing with our data and all this stuff, they're worried that his satellites could be used to spy on Chinese citizens. And so there are defense hawks within China who are not comfortable with, the level of interaction and the level of market penetration that Musk has through Tesla. But this was a reaffirmation that at the highest levels, the government embraces, Musk and Tesla, and it has also been really useful for them in terms of shifting their economy towards electric vehicles, which has been phenomenally successful by all accounts.
Yeah, and I'm sure the audience will be shocked to guess who else is in China this week. None other than, of course, our real Treasury Secretary, Jamie Dimon. And we've seen over the course of the last 6 or so months, all of these...
Real president, I would say.
Right, yeah, the real president, Jamie Dimon, and our real Secretary of State, Elon Musk, together in China at the same time. No, I think we've seen, business leaders, we've definitely seen business leaders flocking back to China post-pandemic. This is both, I believe it's Elon Musk and Dimon's first trip to China post-pandemic. China, by the way, facing another wave of an outbreak and not locking down, which is another kind of interesting piece of context in the broader geopolitical conversation. So it goes to show exactly what you said, Krystal, that there's something very telling accurate and maybe a little bit sad about China's recognition that dealing with economic people in positions of economic power in the United States and economic diplomacy with the United States is probably their best bet to make inroads. And that's
they're like,
true.
we know who really holds the keys to the kingdom in your country, and they're not wrong.
They learned that from WTO and everything after that, and it's still, there's still people who refuse to learn the lessons. Well, they know the lessons; they've just benefited from everyone else's misery.
Yeah. At the same time, so Musk, as tying in the Musk piece, he had commented previously about the Chinese space program, saying that it was far more advanced than a lot of people realized. Put this last piece up on the screen, and we just got an announcement. China launching a new crew for space station. They are planning to land people on the moon by the end of this decade. This is classic, like, sort of national projection of power and prestige. So China officially, really going into the space game, and there's a lot of competition. We're used to talking about, like, the economic competition between the U.S. and China and potential military competition between U.S. and China. Part of that military projection of power is increasingly in space. So this is also kind of a bold statement to the world and to us in particular about their ambitions.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what we're seeing happen in space is, it's eerily reminiscent of the race during the Cold War. It's obviously China has
more than echoes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually kind of eerie of how much not just space. I mean, space in particular is a very on the nose echo, but there are obviously so many other things that happen between the United States and China, the West and China in general, that feel just ripped from the 50s, 60s. And we'll see if anyone has taken to heart the lessons of those very painful and deadly years.
Yeah, indeed. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.